Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Excel workshop, the intermediate level. So in the last workshop, the beginner level workshop, we went through some of the basics about Excel, the interface, some fundamental concepts and shortcuts, and the very basics of functions. So today, this workshop, we will go through a couple more interesting functions and some other things you can utilize in Excel to extract and work with information from your data. And by the way, I can see things popping up in chat. Will the recordings be posted? It will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you look up UCSB Actuarial Association on YouTube, you should be able to find that. And also I see the link is posted in chat as well. Right. So something I want to mention real quick is that so this morning I just had a interview for the internships that I was pursuing, and during the interview, the recruiters actually cared a lot about whether I have experience with Excel. In fact, they probably care more about that than of R or any other coding language. So Excel skills is really an important thing that is still being heavily utilized in the industry, either actuarial industry or anything similar that involves data and data analysis. So yeah, glad you guys are here to get a head start on this. So let's start with this. So also this worksheet is, I believe, posted in the emails that Ethan sent out to you guys through the Actuarial Association email and through the PSAT listserv. So you can hopefully find this worksheet and you can download it from those emails. So we're going to start with the tab task 1. So here I will using this task, I will go through some of these topics. Some of them we mentioned in the last workshop, some of them are new. So we're going to go through how to create tables and use them to store information. We're going to go through a couple string manipulation methods, and then we're going to go through stuff like finding minimum and maximum values, working with date, time or date information. And then we're going to go through logic functions like if, or, and then this is probably an interesting thing, average, count, and sum, but with the if logic, how do we utilize that? And then we're going to go through lookup functions. So to start with, we can see there's the sample data right here. So if you recall from last workshop, we can use Control-Shift-Arrow key to select the entire data range without having to drag your mouse through the things. Like this is probably not that big, but when you work with data of thousands or even tens of thousands of rows, you don't want to drag your mouse through the entire data set. So we can Control-Shift and right, so that selects all the columns. Control-Shift downwards, that selects if you check, it selects the entire data set. And then we use Control-T to create a table out of this. So once I hit that, there's this box will pop up asking this is the data, right? And then my data has headers. Yes, we have headers saying state, governor, party, inauguration, data, end of term. So okay, there we go. We now have the table with filter. Let me expand the columns real quick. If you recall, you can double click these lines in between each column to have them automatically size. So once I double click that, each one of them, that will give us a comfortable view of our data right here. There we go. Probably I wanna, let's align this to the right. Yeah, so just so it looks a bit nicer. So as you can see, this is a data set that contains governor information. If you click these drag down tabs, you can see what this column is composed of. You can see this one is every single state in the United States. There's one observation each. Governor, this is the full name of the governor of each state, their party, their inauguration, the date, and their end of term. This is the governor information table. So now we have the table. And Then let's go through these tasks over here. So we already created the table. We want to sort this table differently than what it looks like right now. We want to sort it by first name. How do we do that? So we can find the names in the governor column, right? Is in first name, last name order. So sorting by first name is basically just sorting by this column. So we can click this this arrow mark over here that opens up the drop down. Over here, we can select to sort this entire table using this column with either ascending or descending order. So we're going to do ascending order in the case of a string is A through Z. Click that. You can see now how the information is sorted with respect to the governor name, starting with Andrew as Bills, and it's now in alphabetical order. Check the parties. So as mentioned, you can open up the drop down to see what the column is composed of. The governor names and the states each one of them are pretty much unique. But in the case of parties, you can now see how this summarizes the information for you. So there are 15 Democrat Party. This one, Democrat Farmer Labor Party, I think this is in Minnesota state. It's a special affiliation of the Democratic Party. There's independent, there's Republican, there's this Republican Note 1 for some reason, which doesn't make quite much sense to me. It counts it for there's 15 of this, there's 32 of Republican in this entire column. So this kind of summarizes the information for you. So now we checked the information. We kind of want to change Democratic Farmer Labor to just Democrat, because having this stand out doesn't really help with our analysis anyways. This is a small party that a party unique to Minnesota, I believe, that affiliate to the Democratic Party. So we want to change this one, as well as this Note 1 that just pops out of nowhere. It's probably a data entry error. This is usually when you go to check your data collection process, but in this case, we're just gonna change this for the example's sake. So how do we keep only these two items that we want to change so we don't have to go into the entire column to look for them? So notice over here, there are these checkboxes. This means which ones out of this column do we want to show. So right now, the top one is select all. So uncheck that. We're now selecting nothing. And we just select this one and this one that we want to change, and then we hit OK. See how now the table is collapsed to the way that it's only keeping the ones that we selected basing on the party. Sorry, did anyone try to ask a question there? I hear something. Or is it a misfire of the microphone of someone? No question? Okay, let's keep moving on then. So now we've selected these two rows basing on the party that we selected. So now we can go ahead and make manual changes. We can delete this thing, and we can reduce this one just to Democrat. And then we can see, okay, so those two unique entries are now gone. We only have Democrat, Independent, and Republican. We can go ahead and select all of this, and so that will return us the entire table again. Yeah, so now we fixed it party by hand. Let's go to strings. So the first one is asking us to find the length of each governor name. This is something we went through in the last workshop, but if you don't recall, we can use a function len, an abbreviation for the word length, to find the length of a string. So let's let's enter some new columns here. So let's call this one length of name. You can see how once I added a new header, it kind of automatically integrates that into our table. So that's just nice. And in here, let's define the function len, and we want this to count the governor name. Is it state or governor name? Yeah, governor name. So we select this cell that contains the governor name string, then we enter. So that tells us 12. Keep in mind again that this 12 is the length of the string, which included the space between the first name and the last name. So if you want to say you actually wanted to know just the English characters, then it's actually 11. The 12 included this space in between. But let's just say that's what we want for now, and we can put your mouse put your mouse on the bottom right corner of this cell and double click when your mouse showcases this cross figure, that automatically applies the formula to the entire column respectively. Like the row that it references is going to automatically move down since we didn't lock it. Yeah, so now we have the count for all the government names, right? Then it's asking us, okay, find the first 3 letters of state name. So to return the first several numbers of letters out of a string, or first number of characters out of a string, I should say, not just letters, we use a function called left. So over here, we can say left. This is the function name left. And then we select the text, which is the state name, comma. And then the second parameter is how many characters from the left do we want? And they wanted the first 3, right? So 3, parentheses close, enter. You can see how this now gives us NEW, new, from New York. Again, if you apply this down to the entire column, you can see how this is applying. So for Arkansas is ARK, Tennessee is TEN. First 3 letters of all the states, like Illinois, is actually kind of hard to tell. It's kind of hard to tell from the ILL, but it returns all the 3 characters. If you want instead the last 3 letters, so the 3 letters from the right, is a function called right. It's kind of intuitive, from the left or from the right. So just change the function to right, keep it 3 characters. You can see now the first line is changed to ORK, which is the last 3 character of New York. Again, if you overwrite the entire column with this, it changes. Arkansas as AS, Tennessee is SEE. So left and right, these are 2 functions that will give you back the, from the left or from the right, however number of characters that you specify. It takes in two parameters. One is the source text, the cell that contains the text, and then the number of characters that you're looking for. So there's that. Then it asks us to clean up the dates. So the dates refers to the inauguration dates. And these are actually date information, because once you select the cell in this window that you can observe the content of the cell, it shows us that this is actually a date information, but it's formatted in a way that is 1 January 11, maybe 2011. So it's kind of not the most commonly used way in the United States, the most intuitive way in the United States. Over here, we usually do month, date, and then year, right? So how do we change that? This is just an effect of self-formatting. Recall from last time that date information, the very nature of this piece of data, piece of information, is an integer number. Adding up from the beginning of 19,000, I believe, or was it 19,000? Sorry, let me double check real quick so I'm not giving out horribly wrong information. Yeah, 19,000. So that's the nature of the date information. So what we can do is just select the entire column of dates using Control-Shift downwards. Then over here, we can see this drop-down box that we can change the format of the cell. We can change this to what is called short. It's by default the format in the United States. So you can see now it's January 1st, 2011. There's January 13th, 2015. You can see now the format is a bit more easy to infer for us over here. So the dates are now cleaned up. And then we want to do something about the dates. So it's asking us, what is the oldest date in this entire date, and what is the newest? So let me get rid of these columns real quick, just so I have room for our demonstration. So what is the oldest date and newest date? So remember what I just said, that dates are just values, and the later the date or the early or the newer the date or later the date, the value will grow larger because it's further away from 19,000, right? So 1900, not 19,000, 1900. So when we say we want to look for the newest inauguration, we can use we're actually looking for the largest number of all these dates. So when it comes to look for the largest number or the maximum number or smallest to minimum number, we have function max and min. Easy to understand, right? Max and min. So say we want to do max, and then for the function, we feed it all the numbers that we wanted to compare. So in this case, we select the entire date column. It returns us this, a number that means nothing because we kind of need to make it a date to understand. So we format it as a short date. There we go. Now we have January 31st of 2018. If you look into the drop-down box and look at the range of this all these days, we can see the largest is 2018. And then in the drop-down, there's January. In January, they have these 3 dates. And so the largest the newest is actually 2018, January 31st. So that matches up. And similarly, if you want to do min, the function min, and select all the dates as well, parentheses close, hit enter, and we gotta reformat this. Yeah, so the earliest, the earliest or the oldest inauguration is actually January 1st, 2007. Again, you can verify using the this drop-down box. There's 2007, January 1st. This is the earliest possible in our data set. So there we can actually use min and max to find the minimum value and maximum value, which in terms of date, that can gives us the earliest or latest date that we are looking at. And then this is for each governor, find the year, month, and day of the inauguration. That basically asks us to separate this entire date information into, or extract the year, date, and month out of this entire piece of date individually. So what we can do is here, we can put in the columns. So there's year, there's month, there's date. And what we can do is, this is something we covered at last workshop. We have the functions year, month, and day specifically to extract the information out of data information. So if we use function year on this date here, we extract 2011 for us. Similarly, month of this date is January, so it's a 1. And then date of this. Something is wrong. Oh, day, sorry. Day of this. What? Hold on. I think I probably. Okay, this is awkward.
Ivor, you gotta change the format.
Yeah, it's probably formatting the 1 into, yeah. We're gonna show this just a simple number, and we want to reduce, we want to see the decimal places. Yeah, that looks better. It's formatting the 1 that it returned to me into a entire date, and in that case, 1 is corresponded to January 1st, 19,000, like we said last time. So that's what was happening there. Now this looks much better. So now we can generalize these to all the columns. So now everything, all of these dates are extracted like respectively. You can see 2018, January 16th. Yes. So now we have extracted year, month, and date out of let's just call it day so it's not confusing, out of the inauguration date. So there's that. Then we can go into conditions and lookups. Interesting stuff. So let's get rid of this one. We're not doing that one. So the first one, let's go for count number of Democrat and then Republican governors. So let's expand this one. So, that's that much. Let me reformat the cells just so it's a bit easier to read. Oops, I did something horribly wrong. Yeah, let's stay that way. Right, so the first task it asks us to do is to count how many Democrat governors are there and how many Republican governors are there. So if we want to eyeball the information out of this, what we can do is actually we can go to the party, we can drop this down. So over here in the parentheses, it tells us how many governors are there for each party. There's 16 Democrat, there's 33 Republican, 1 independent, right? So we can eyeball this from this. But say if we want to write a function that returns the value into a cell, so we can use that number later. And we don't want to manually write this into a cell because if in any case we update any of this information, we want the answer to change automatically, dynamically with the change of the data. How do we do that? Using a function. So there comes the COUNTIF function. So to start with, we can introduce briefly what the count function does. The count function, say if I write a count function here and I select all these values here, it will count how many values I selected. And then it will, wait, it's not 0. Let's do COUNTIFs instead. So COUNTIFs, what it does is by certain conditions, it will count how many values are there that matches the condition we put in. So it's called COUNTIF. It's like a combination of count function and if function. There's this COUNTIFs with a additional s in the end. That the COUNTIFs just allow you to enter multiple multiple areas to look for and multiple conditions corresponding to each area, which I think there's an example that we're going to use that later. So in this case, we use a COUNTIF. The first parameter that we're going to put in is the range. So what we're looking for is in the party column. So we select that. And then we want to count all the Democrat governors, say. And then what we're really looking for, the criteria is that the party, the value is equal to the string Democrat, right? So the way we're going to put in criteria here is put in the criteria as a string that is enclosed by quotation marks. And in here, we just set the criteria should be that the party is equal to Democrat. So equal sign Democrat. This kind of, yeah, and then we hit enter, it returns us 16. It tells us that in this range, this entire party column that we selected, as long as whenever there's a party entry that equals Democrat, it will count 1. So then it counted 16. So this matches the results that's in here. So there are 16 Democrats. So this is how we use COUNTIF to return how many Democrat governors are there. And if say instead we want to look for Republican, then we can change the criteria to equal Republican. Hit enter again, there's 33 of them, matches. So that's how COUNTIF works. And the next task is similar. It has to create a new column inauguration year. So it's the same thing. We already created year over here. And calculate the number of governors who started their tenure in either 2012 or 2013. So similar thing, we're basically counting how many ones of year 2012 or 2013 are there in the entire year column. Except for this time, we have two criteria. It can either be 2012 or it can be 2013. So in this case, we utilize count ifs with the S so that we can enter multiple ranges and multiple criteria. So the first range, let's look through the year.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, someone tried to ask a question. No? Okay, if you're not trying to ask a question, may I please ask you guys, please keep your mic muted just so the noises doesn't accidentally come in, okay? Thank you. So where were we at? Count ifs. So we've selected the first range being the years. And the first criteria we want it to be in the string again, equals 2012. And then we will look through the years again. And with another criteria being equals 2013. And then close parentheses. Whoops, I made a mistake. I think this relationship between these two is and, so that is wrong. How could I put this to be? We can put this to be. This is kind of embarrassing. Ethan, would you mind help me out here? So can I do or inside of this kind of criteria specification? Because I thought this the criteria inside the count ifs are kind of limited.
I believe you should, because or just returns a true or false. So I don't see what the issue would be.
So can I put an or function inside this?
I wouldn't put it in the quotes.
Oh, so I can just use or function. But then,
well, I don't think you need quotes at all. I think you could just
see, normally for count if or count ifs, the logic specification needs to be in quotation marks. It's actually running through all of these and compare them with the logic.
What you can do is you can just reference the first cell. So I think you can just do H3 less than, oh, sorry, no, just H3
so this one
equals
to 2012 and then H3 equals 2013.
And I think it should,
with this or.
It should work, I think.
No, it doesn't quite work like that. See, this is one of the tricky part about count if function, as well as similarly, there's average if, there's sum if. So the criteria parameters in these functions is kind of different than the simple if logics that we wrote last time. If you recall from last workshop, when we say if, then in the logical test, we are writing something like a particular cell less than 2012. No, not if. Oh, for if I gotta put, say, yes and no. So then it will evaluate this entire. This is a complete logical statement, but for count ifs or average if or sum if, this kind of functions, the criteria are written in such a way that it's a string that doesn't have one thing greater than another thing or one thing equal to another thing. It's simply equal to 2012. It will take in this string and then apply this logical test to each one of these cells. So if I say just count if this going through this anything equal to 2012, this will give us back the 1. Yeah, there's only one of them in 2012. To meet what this task is asking us, one way to do it is utilizing two countifs. So all we're going to do is count the 2012 and then count the 2013 and then sum them together, right? So we can count if equal 2012 plus count if same thing, H3 to H52. But this time we do equal 2013. So now it's a subtotal of 3. So if we look through the years, there's 1 from 2012, 2 from 2013. So a total of 3. So what I did wrong back there when I tried to utilize count ifs, I think, is because when I overlap this, when I go through the same area to look through and then put in multiple criterias, the relationship between those criterias is that it has to satisfy both criterias for this to count. So there's no there's not a single year that will equal to both 2012 and 2013. That's why it returned me a 0 because it counted nothing. That's probably what happened back there. So there's that count ifs, but the basic idea is there for this kind of function. Count if you give them the range to look through, and then you give them something is almost like a partial logic statement in the format of a string enclosed by quotation marks. It will run through this logic statement with every single cell inside the range that you selected. And then it will do the function. In this case, it's count. If I'm trying to do the average number of all these years for all these numbers for some reason, say I want to, for some reason, I want to find the average number of all these values that are less than, say, 2015. I can write something like a average if, then select the same range, and then criteria is that I want this to be all that's less than 2015. I want to see all those values less than 2015 what they average to. They average to 2011 point something. So this is average if. There's some if that will take out everyone that meets the criteria and sum all of them together. So those are the 3 functions you can utilize. Yeah, so there's that, the calculation functions that integrates the conditional calculations that you can do. There are 3 functions there. And moving on to the next one, find the name of New York's governor. So from here, we're moving on to look up functions. So you can see how the task is asking us to look up the governor with look up the governor name with the state being New York. This is the logic behind the action that this task is asking us to do here. So to perform lookups, there are 2 different ways. There are 2 different functions that can achieve the same goal, and they are different in a way that I will explain soon. So one of the functions is called VLOOKUP, or vertical lookup. That's what it kind of stands for. The other one is index and match. Index and match are 2 different functions, and they work together to return us the result. So to start with, I will actually show you guys. Let's show VLOOKUP first. So the VLOOKUP function, if you put the function in there and look at the syntax, it takes in the lookup value, this is the thing that you're basically asking the function to match. So we are looking for the state to match. We're trying to make the state match New York, and then give us back the governor name that corresponds to that, right? So the lookup value in this case is the string New York. This is what we call lookup value. And then we want to select the table array. The table array is basically the entire table that we have here. You can put the entire thing in there. It's called the table array. It's looking up inside this table. And then column index number. What column index number refers to is that, okay, so we are looking in this table and looking in the leftmost column. This is something important to notice because the VLOOKUP function, we told them the lookup value is always going to look for the lookup value in the leftmost column of the table array that we selected. So in this case, state is the leftmost column. So it's going to look for New York inside this. That's going to be fine. And we have the table array here. The column index refers to, okay, once we find a New York in a particular row, then which column of this row do you want me to return? In this case, we want to return the governor name, which is this column, right? The second column. So this is the second column that we wanted to return. Then here we will put a 2. And then there's this last parameter that ignore the range lookup. The range lookup, yes. It's called what range lookup, or you can understand this basically as approximation. This last parameter is optional, but you can put it in there just to be safe. What it basically asks you is whether you will tolerate approximation, like something. If there's no exact match that is found, it will go to the one that is closest to the value that you specify. In most cases, when you utilize lookup functions, you want to either find the exact match or tell you that there's no match. So in this case, we put false, meaning that we don't want approximation. We don't allow approximation. We want to find exact match as the string New York. And it's going to look up in this table array. It's going to return us the second column, which is the governor name. So that's all set. We push enter. It tells us Andrew. How do I pronounce this? I don't want to butcher the name. Let's just not. I don't want to butcher the name, so I'm not going to pronounce that. We're just going to check. Okay, for state New York, conveniently, this is the very top of the list by now, and this Andrew. Yeah, so that's the name we're looking for. This is a VLOOKUP. Again, the most important thing to remember about the VLOOKUP, well, this is also the biggest limitation of VLOOKUP function, is that when you're looking for something, when you put in the lookup value and select a table array, it's always going to look for the value that you specify in the leftmost column of the entire array that you select. So say if I change the array to, let's say, to this without the state, I'm selecting from governor to day, these columns. Then what this function is going to do is to look up the value New York inside the governor names. Of course, it's going to find nothing, right? So there's no way to change that. This is simply how VLOOKUP work. It's a huge limitation of this function. Although this function is kind of easy to use, but it can only look up the value on the leftmost column. I guess this is acceptable since in a lot of times in the data set, your leftmost column is probably the index column, whether it's some kind of name or some kind of, say, ID number. This kind of index variable is probably going to be the leftmost one. But still, this function just has this huge limitation that you must take note of. You must remember this is how the function behaves. And moving on to the next task, I will show how to instead use index and match functions to do similar things. The second task asks us to find the governor's name who started in this date, January 8th, 2015. So in this case, we are looking up a date and then returning the matching row's governor name, right? So this time we're going to use index and match. These are two different functions that work together to solve this kind of problem. So when you do, let's start with match, how this match works. So when you do function match, again, the first one is the lookup value. In this case, we want to look up January 8th, 2015. But in order to put this in, we must put in the original form of the date, which is the integer number. So let's check out what that is. So January 8th of 2015. You can see the system think it's a date. I want the number of this. So it's 42012. So we're going to match. We're going to look for 42012 in the lookup array. So where do we look for this? We're going to look for this in the inauguration column. And then the last parameter is again a optional match type. This is the same thing. The match type takes in three kind of values. You can put in either 1 or 0 or -1. By default, it's 1. So it's going to look for exact match or the next smallest. By default, it is 1. Or you can say, I want exact match only, then it's 0. You can put in 0 for exact match only. Or you can put in -1 for exact or next largest. But in this case, we're going to put in 0. It gives us this 8. What does that mean? So we selected this entire column. It's basically an array, right? So there's the first one, the second one, the third one. 8 means that what we're looking for is the 8th one of this array. So let's check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, you can see how January 8th, 2015 is the 8th element of this column. So how do we use this piece of information? Let's keep this information right here for now. Actually, keep this in the same. Let's keep this here for now. So how do we use this information to get us the governor's name? That's where index function come in. So no. Let's do index. So index function, what this does is it's going to return us a value out of a particular array. So how does it work? Let's just jump into the example. So we want this to help us return the governor name, right? So we select the entire governor column as the array. And then, okay, we have the array. It has a lot of rows. Which row do we want this column to return? We know we are looking for the 8th row because it's all corresponding. The table didn't change, right? So the date we're looking for is in the 8th. It is the 8th one. We're also looking for the 8th name. We can put in 8 here. The column number is optional since we selected a single column array this time. But if we select, say, the entire table, if the array is the entire table, then yes, we want the second column to be returned. We can put a 2 there. But in this case, I just put in the single column array. So 8 there returns us Charlie Baker, which is the case here. So this is how index and match, these two functions, work together to solve the problem. You don't really have to occupy 2 spaces to do this, since you can just put the entire match function. I'm copying the entire match function and then put it in place of the row number. So then this is a single function that it uses match to find the number of row that we're looking for and then put it into the row number while we're looking through the array of governor names. So if I hit enter now, you can see it still does the right thing. This is how you can combine index and match into one cell to do the same thing. And oh, I'm running I'm using way too much time than I'm supposed to. So right now I'm just gonna really quickly show you guys how VLOOKUP can propose a limitation. Take a look at this this task over here. Find inauguration here. This is not. Okay, actually these tasks are all technically doable with VLOOKUP, I think. Political party. Yeah, these tasks are all technically doable for VLOOKUP. But say if we want to do something like, we want to find which state does Bill Walker belongs to. If we use VLOOKUP in this case, we will have to select the table array in something like this, right? To make governor the leftmost column so we can look up a particular governor. But then state column that we want to return is no longer inside the table array. We can't return this. Remember, we have to specify which row do we want this to return. We can't specify -1. I actually tried that earlier. If you try that, you can see that returns a value error saying -1 doesn't make sense here. So in this case, if we want to look up a particular governor and return the state, without changing the order of the columns, this is actually not doable by VLOOKUP function. So this is what it looks like when VLOOKUP propose a limitation. But for index and match, it's separate anyways. We enter the lookup range into match function, but we enter what we want to return the array into index function. It's completely separate. They don't affect each other. So that's why kind of this ongoing debate in the industry right now that saying that this idea that index match method is much better than VLOOKUP method because there's just no such limitation. But again, it's up to you guys to judge. If the situation allows, you can always choose to use VLOOKUP if that's what you like. But yeah, that's it about those functions. And this concludes all the content that I will be going over in this tab. Before I pass on to Ethan, are there any questions about this section?
Can you show again how you got both the index and match functions in one cell?
Oh, here. So basically, index function takes two parameters, right? The first one is the array that we want to, where the value we're returning is from, basically the column that we want to return. The second parameter is the row number. So which row of the entire governor column are we returning? Are we returning the first one or returning the second one? This parameter is about that. So which one to return is actually, this information is produced by the match function. Remember when I did match function separately, it told us 8, meaning the date that we're looking for is the 8th column of this entire data. So I just put the entire match function here inside the index function. So the match function will return 8, and this 8 will be used as the row number in the index function. Is that making sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, an important thing is you do need to select, you do need to see how these two array that I selected are starting from the same level and then end at the same level. I scrolled way too much. So see how these two are aligned. This is important. If these two are somehow misaligned and the information doesn't, you know what I mean? It's important to align these two arrays so that it's not a mistake that you're making. But under in this condition, this is how it works. The match produced the row number immediately feeds into index function to return the result that we want. Any other questions? All right, we will stay later on. So if you have more questions, you can always ask us later. So now I'm gonna pass on to Ethan to introduce you guys to something even more fun. It's called pivot tables. Ethan, you want to take over?
Yeah, let me know if you guys can hear me. I'm going to be sharing my screen.
Yeah, you're just fine.
Perfect. All right, so yeah, we're gonna be going over pivot tables. But before that, I just want to add one quick thing to what Ivo was saying about VLOOKUP and index match. So VLOOKUP is a lot simpler. It takes a lot less time to write because there are just less arguments in general. But do know that out there in industry, there are people who think index match is superior to VLOOKUP. I had an interview with someone and we talked for like 5 minutes about how index match was better than VLOOKUP. So just know that there are some people who are VLOOKUP elitists and there are some people who are index match elitists. So it's good to know both so you can have that conversation in the first place. Anyway, let's make pivot tables. So in order to make a pivot table, it's really easy. You just say you have a table here. You don't even have to make it a table. You just select anywhere in this table. You can click insert, pivot table, and then pivot table is in the top left of the insert tab on the ribbon. Then it'll pop up this window right here, create pivot table. So there are a few things here that you actually do need to pay attention to. Select the table arrange. This is really important. You have to make sure that everything in your table that you want is selected. If it's not, for example, if we only had this until F, if this, for example, only had it selected until F, we'd have a problem because we would just miss out on this age column, and that's never good. You never want to miss out on your data. These two right here use an external data source. I've never seen anybody use this, so I don't think you really need to worry about this. This is going to be mostly what you need. And then here, where you want it to be placed, it kind of depends on what you need, but I think typically you want it on the existing worksheet so you can see your raw data. Otherwise, you have no idea what you're referencing and you have to kind of search through your individual tabs. So you have 20 tabs, you have to search through 20 tabs just to find your original data, which is just inconvenient. So then you can click anywhere or you can just type in a cell. I just decided to click this cell because it's right next to it and it's whatever. Add this data to the data model. This checkbox, I also have never seen anybody use this. So I don't think you ever need to worry about this. This is, I believe it's for if you want to compare pivot tables to each other, but I don't think it's really used that often. So you can click OK. And then here you can see it makes a sort of a base foundation for pivot table. Up on the ribbon, we have 2 extra tabs now, one for pivot table analyze and one for design. And then on the right, this is the most important part of pivot tables. You have this pivot table fields. So you have all of the columns right here. You can see that this matches all of the columns that you have. And then you have 4 fields right here. So you can click and drag any of these columns into any of these fields, and then it'll populate your pivot table. So say we want to split it up by party and we want to see how many governors there are by party. I know Ivo did this earlier, and this is going to be a much quicker way to do exactly what he was doing. So we can say we want party, we can just click it or we can drag it, it's whatever. I normally click it and then drag it afterwards. So we can click party and then we can just click governor. And you can see it sort of populates right here. And this doesn't tell us anything. This doesn't help us at all. And you can see down here, when we click the checkbox, it automatically populates those columns into rows. What you can do is you can just move this. Say we want party in rows and we want columns to be governor. You can see that it has all the governors and it's all 50 and it still doesn't tell us anything, right? So what we can do is we can drag another thing of governor, we can drag governor again down to values. And then now it'll actually populate something. Oh, sorry, we don't need to do that. Never mind. We can drag governor over to values. And now you can see that it has the count of governor. And you can see there are total 50 as there should be. And then you can see the different parties for each governor. And this is just a really quick way. You have party in rows and then governor in values. Now, if you want to, for whatever reason, this doesn't really apply to governor, but if you want to change this value instead of count, you can click this and then click value field settings. And then right here, it'll bring up this little pop-up. And then you can select, say you want sum of governor, which doesn't make sense because they're strings and not numbers. But see, since they're not numbers, it'll just be 0. So we can do a different example. So say we want to have their salaries, right? And then say we want it by end of term, for example. So we can put end of term in the column. So then you can see these are the years where the terms end for each governor. And then it'll say sum of salary. So Excel sort of tries to predict what you want when you put in a value here. So here, Excel sort of predicted that we wanted sum of salary, but that doesn't really tell us anything either, since there are different numbers of governors in each party. So then what we can do is we can just do average. And then now you can see what the average salaries are for each party, depending on what their end term is. If you want to, for example, just see that if you're in the Democratic Party, depending on your end term, if you make more money, if you have your end term now or in 4 years, whatever it may be. And then if you want to format it, it's the same as formatting for anything else. You just click and drag whatever you want, or you can do Control-Shift down to the right. And then in the Home tab of the ribbon, you can just click any format you want. I'm just going to do accounting because we're doing salary. And you can see over here, the average salary for independent is $679K. That doesn't really mean anything because there was only one independent governor. But say if we get rid of the end of term and we just have the average, you can see that the average matters a little more. It still doesn't for independent because we still only have one independent governor. But for Democrat and Republican that has more than one, you can see that there is an average salary that matters now. And you can see that Democrats typically make more than Republican governors. As far as formatting goes, it's exactly what I was saying before, where you can just kind of select it and then format it however you want. If you have like dates, you can reformat that as well. So say we have the inauguration. If we click anything that has a date value, you'll see that it has years, quarters, and then your actual inauguration. So this is just how pivot tables split up dates in general. It'll split up by year, and then if you expand the year, it'll split it up by quarter. Sometimes it'll split it up by month instead of just quarter. I'm not really sure when it does one or the other, but you'll see that in quarter one, it's just the first 3 months. It'll be January, February, March. And then quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, so on and so forth. But as far as these months go, you can see in January, the average salary for a Democrat whose inauguration was in January 2013. And then this is just sort of ways where you can kind of filter it out. If you want to actually filter it, we can say inauguration, we put that in the filter. And then up at the top, you can see these top two rows, they added a little thing here. So if we click all, or click the little drop down where you would normally be clicking on a filter, say we want everybody that was inaugurated in February, right? We can just click February, click OK, and then these will be all the people that were inaugurated in February at any point. So you can see that doesn't really happen that often. Most of them, I think, should be in January. So we can click January, and then it'll have a lot more. You can see that there are a lot more inauguration dates because a lot more governors were inaugurated in January. Now, if, for example, we want to select multiple, we want everybody who's inaugurated in the first half of the year. We can click the first 6 months, click OK, and then it'll have these first 6 months right here, which again is pretty much everybody. Conversely, if we want to not do that and do the last half of the year, we can do the same thing, selecting the last 6 months, and it's not as many. But yeah, that's pretty much the basics of pivot tables. A lot of it is sort of trial and error and sort of figuring it out for yourself. One thing to note is if you click away from it, the pivot table settings field, that'll go away. You just click back onto the pivot table and it'll come back. If you go to pivot table analyze, you can change the name of it. You can have active field be whatever it is. You can, as you click around in say average salary, you can see what the active field is. You can click here and you can see party, inauguration date, years, quarters, whatever it may be. So a lot of it is sort of just, it's playing around with it and sort of getting comfortable with it. But this is definitely something that's really, really important. I myself have used it in a couple internships, and I know I've used it in a couple case studies as well. So definitely pay attention and definitely learn how to make pivot tables properly. If you go into design, this is something else that's also for just formatting purposes. If you want to make it green, if you want to be fancy, it's kind of up to you. You can make it grayscale. It's also up to you. Grand totals, this is actually something that's pretty useful. Say we don't want the grand totals because it doesn't mean anything for, say we're doing, actually, sometimes it will matter, but sometimes it won't. Say we don't want grand total, we can just take that off and that field is gone. And then we just have the average salaries for this. We can also take off years and quarters and just have it by party again. If we want the grand total, we'll say for rows and columns, for example, right here, under average of salary, it won't actually have the sum. It'll say grand total, but it won't have the sum necessarily. It'll be, so say we have average, it'll be the average of all of these values. So, or not necessarily the average of these values, but the average of all 50 governors. So if we just had all 50 of them and we took all their average salary, this is what it would be. And one thing that I don't believe was mentioned in this workshop or the last workshop is if you want a really quick way to get the average, the sum, or the count of any amount of cells, you can just select all of them. And in the bottom right here, you can see the average, the count, and the sum. So this is really useful if you're just trying to get a really quick thing and you don't want to write a formula. This is like instant. You don't even have to think about it. And then you can see that the average matches up right here. So it's another way to check as well. But I think as far as pivot tables go, that's pretty much the bulk of it. Are there any questions at this point? Also, is there anything that you guys would like me to repeat? I know I went a little fast.
How did you get to the quarters and years again?
So yeah, if you take inauguration, for example, and you dragged it to columns, whatever it is, basically any date value, you'll get 3 fields that are split up by years, quarters, and then inauguration is the specific date. So it's pretty much only if you have a date. So you can see the inauguration is a date value here. So that's where you'll get that. If you did end of term, that's just the year number that won't return it because it doesn't have a specific month or a specific day value.
Wait, sorry, can you do it again?
Yeah. So if we take inauguration and we just check that box, it'll just put it, I think it defaults puts it into rows. Say we don't want it there, we can put inauguration in the columns, and then years and quarters will sort of go along with that. So if we don't have inauguration there initially, these 2 fields won't be here, right? But if we drag inauguration into columns, it'll add quarters and years automatically because it sort of splits inauguration date into more manageable and more visually digestible terms, if that makes sense. So if we expand this 2007, you can see Q1 is here, right? And then if, for example, I updated this and I had something that was like 2000, let's just add it. We can say we have I don't know, December 2nd, 2007, right? And then we just expand. So then we have to, since we added data, we go to pivot table analyze, and then where is it? Oh no, it might be in design. I don't know. Oh, select, I think. Wait a minute. Oh, change data source. Oh my God. So then here we can expand it to 52 just to add that extra row in. And then you can see that it has Q4 and that includes December. We don't have anything here, of course, because I didn't add anything except for the date. But that's just to sort of demonstrate that if you have whatever month in whatever quarter, it'll split it up like that. I don't think it always does. Sometimes you won't have the quarters, but it's pretty standard to see it split up by the year like this. And it's sort of, if you want extra information, it'll split it up by year, but if you want extra information, then it'll sort of split it up like that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so I didn't like see it automatically pop out, which is why I was confused.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then something that I did forget to mention in right here for calculations, if under fields, items, and sets, if you do a calculated field, you can have a specific formula given a field, right? So you can name the field of whatever it is, and then you can have, say we want to do, I don't know, average for the end of term, right? We can just say average end, right? And then we can just say average, or that's not a good formula. Let's just do, just for the sake of example, let's do term plus 2. Right? Say, I don't know, they're reelected for 2 years, whatever it is. We can just say equals, and then whatever end of, I think we can just do end of term, or we can do plus 2. I'm not exactly sure. So then if we add plus 2, Oh no, that doesn't work either. Let me get rid of this.
It doesn't work because end of term contains strings, that's why.
Right.
Wait, does it in this data though? In my example, end of term contains strings.
No, I think this has been changed. So if we just do count, might not work either. Actually, sum should work. So if we do sum plus 2, so if we go to 2007, we should see, let me add this real quick. If we just sort this real quick, why does end of term have 2019? Interesting. So I can't figure out a proper example for this right now, but calculated field, if you were to need it, it's really useful for being able to add something. Say you want, I guess what you can do is if you have, say, like price of movies, for example, and you want to buy like 6 movies, right? And you can just add, if you were to buy 6 movies, you can just do times 6 of whatever it was. And then you should be able to add it. Say we wanted to do salary times 6, which is huge. Hit OK. Oh, okay. We might have to reference that then. Let me see. Huh.
Try just salary, the column name.
Oh, will that work? Oh, okay. And then we add field. And then we can take
field.
End of term out. And then we can see that it's multiplied by 6, which is obviously massive. But yeah. So that's calculated field, and that's pretty useful. In some cases, I don't really use it that often. I think finance will probably use it more than anything else. But yeah, are there any questions now? I think that's pretty much everything for pivot tables, and then we can move on to the exercises.
I just want to add a couple words very briefly. So the point of having pivot tables is that it's really helpful for data aggregation. It's basically a smart way that you can aggregate data. Say you want to do it by these variables in rows and by these variables in columns, and they will cross-reference each other. And then you can say, oh, I want to aggregate the sum of this variable, the average of that variable. Just put them, you can just drag each one of them into the corresponding places in the pivot table fields, and then it will automatically sort out, okay, which column, crossing which column is which values, and it will just format it for you automatically in a really nice way. And all you need to do is as easy as dragging these variables in and out of the pivot table fields, instead of having to, find a spot in the chart in the tab yourself, and then write each individual say row title, column title, and then write each individual function yourself. It skips all of that for you, especially in the well, I mean, once you're exposed to real world projects, you will see that this is particularly useful in the very beginning of the project when you try to get a overall understanding of the data you're looking at. What's the average level like? What's the summation total look like? When you try to look at those aggregations, pivot table is particularly useful for those. Yeah, any other questions about this tab or the previous tab?
All right, cool. Well, if there are no more questions, we can move on to these pivot table exercises. So I can also stop recording now.